I have stacked one stone at dawn for every day I have kept this gate. 10 years of them line the east wall of the toll house now. Gray river stone gone smooth with handling. Stacked in columns I stopped trying to count around year 4. I never carved a name into any of them. I never carved my own name into anything up here. A man who stops being anyone in particular is easier to leave alone, and I had reasons, back then, for wanting to be left alone. The pass is called Kesh Vantor. It sits between two dead volcanic teeth at the spine of the Ashen Highlands, the only walkable crossing for 80 miles in either direction, and for 10 years I have been the one who opens the gate at first light, and closes it at dark, and writes down the name of everyone who passes through, by hand, in a ledger nobody in the capital ever asks to see. Merchants, shepherds, the occasional courier too proud to take the longer, safer road. I write their names because someone should, and because it is the only kind of counting I have left in me that isn't stones. 10 years ago I rode this same pass as outrider for a royal caravan, 3 wagons and an honor escort of 6, taking the young queen's household north for a treaty signing that never happened, because the Voran skein came down out of the low cloud with raider craft blacked out, and no warning at all. And by the time the smoke cleared I was the only one of the escort left breathing, half buried under a collapsed switchback with a leg that wouldn't hold weight, and no sound coming out of my throat that I recognized as my own voice. It took me the better part of a year to walk again. By the time I could, the pass had been declared closed by treaty dispute, the wreckage cleared by someone else's hands, and word had already gone back that the escort was lost to a man. I told myself I would send word once I was fit to be looked at without flinching. Then I told myself the queen had a kingdom to run, and did not need an outrider's ghost turning up scarred and slow to remind her of the worst morning of her life. Then I stopped telling myself anything and simply stayed, because staying was easier than deciding I deserved to be found. So I built a gatehouse out of the same rock that had nearly killed me, and I opened it every morning, and I stacked a stone at the base of the east wall for every sunrise I saw come up over the teeth of the mountains, and somewhere in the 4th or 5th year I stopped doing it to mark grief, and started doing it, because a habit outlives its own reasons if you let it run long enough. The column came through 2 hours before dusk, on a day the wind had already turned cold and mean. I heard them before I saw them, too many boots, too many low voices, the particular hush of people who have learned recently and badly that noise draws worse things than silence. I opened the gate the way I open it for anyone, stood in the frame with my ledger under one arm, and started counting heads to write down. Then I saw the banner folded small and carried close against someone's chest instead of flown, the ashen sunburst worked in thread gone dull with travel, and I understood before I let myself understand that this was not a trade caravan. She was near the middle of the column, in a traveling coat with the hood back despite the cold, because a queen does not hide her face from her own frightened people even when hiding it would be easier. 10 years had put gray at her temples that hadn't been there, and a steadiness in her jaw that hadn't needed to be there before the ambush. I would have known her at 40 paces in a blackout. I knew her at 100. I did what I have done for 10 years when something threatens to be more than I can hold. I looked down at my ledger and asked the column's lead scout, in the flat, useful voice of a man who is only a toll keeper, how many travelers tonight, and whether they needed the north storeroom opened for the children. Merrick. She said it before I had finished the sentence. Not a question, not the careful testing way a person says a name they aren't sure of. She said it the way you say a fact the world has finally caught up to. I did not answer right away, because answering meant it was true, and I had spent 10 years arranging my whole life around it not being true. Merrick Vale, she said again, closer now, the column parting around her without being asked to, the way people part around weather. You're dead. I signed the order myself. I read your name into the memorial stone with my own hand. I know, I said. It was the first time in 10 years I had said my own name out loud to another person, and it came out rougher than I expected, like a door that hadn't been used. I'm sorry it took me this long to tell you otherwise. She did not embrace me. She did not weep the way the old songs say a grieving queen should weep when the dead come walking back. She stood very still and looked at me with an expression I recognized because I had spent a decade watching it cross my own face in still water. The particular stillness of someone deciding, in real time, whether to believe the impossible thing standing in front of them. 10 years, she said. Where? Here, I said, and gestured at the gatehouse, the ledger, the stacked stones catching the last flat light along the east wall. I never left the pass. She walked past me into the yard before I could stop her, and she found the stones the way people find the thing they were always going to look for first, whether they knew it or not. She crouched at the base of the wall and put one hand flat against a column of them, and I watched her count under her breath. The way I used to count, before I understood you can love a number too large to be useful. 1 for every morning, I said, when she looked up at me. I couldn't send word. Not after the first year, not after the second. By the time I could walk to a courier post, it felt like sending word would only be asking you to grieve me twice, so I kept the gate instead. I told myself if anyone from that caravan ever needed a safe crossing again, they'd find one, even if they never knew it was me holding it open. You could have come home. I didn't think I had one left to come home to. I thought I'd only remind you of the morning you lost 6 good people and nearly lost yourself signing that memorial order. I looked past her at the column still filing through the gate, tired faces, children carried on hips, the particular exhaustion of people who have run from the same enemy that took my leg and my voice a decade ago. Looks like the scanner back. 3 days behind us, she said. I came through this pass myself because I remembered an outrider once told me it was the one crossing they'd never think to watch closely enough. Something moved through her voice then, not quite a question. You built that reputation into a gatehouse and gave it to strangers for 10 years. Someone had to keep the gate. Someone did, she said, and stood. And for the first time since she'd said my name, she let something soften all the way through. The careful queen's stillness, giving way to something plainer and harder to perform. 10 years, Merrick. I never stopped reading your name at the memorial. I read it every year on the anniversary, out loud, to a stone that was never going to answer. I heard the bell you'd have rung, if you'd known, I said. I just didn't have a way to ring it back. You have one now. She looked at the gate standing open behind her, the last of her people crossing into the shelter of the yard, the mountain going violet at the edges as the light failed. Close it once more tonight, and then come home. Not as the dead man on my memorial stone, as the outrider who held a mountain pass alone for 10 years and never once let it fall, waiting for someone worth opening it for. I closed the gate the way I have closed it every night for a decade. Then, for the first time in all of them, I walked away from it instead of staying to watch the dark come down alone.